All right, we are live. Thanks for joining me, Annie. It's great to see
Absolutely.
you.
I know. We see each other on Facebook and now we're actually seeing each other in real.
I know, right? Well, it's a pleasure. Welcome, Annie Zaleski, writer extraordinaire, doer of many things. So
Yes.
I've noticed. Yeah.
Yes. Correct.
Are you still teaching?
So no, so I'm full-time freelance. And so
Yeah.
obviously like many people that's cobbling together a lot of things. I have some marketing clients, I have some journalism clients, I do some content marketing, I do research, I do a little bit of everything. So it's, whoever wants to hire me to do cool stuff, that's what I'm doing.
Awesome. Well, yeah. I mean, I really enjoy your writing, and I'll tell you why.
Oh, it's a surprise.
Well, I mean, that's why I invited you on, but I really feel like you tell a story that makes you care about a person.
Nice.
Like that
That's
woman with
always
all
my
the
aim.
Prince memorabilia you did that time.
That was my favorite one. Like that was like I found that story. So I guess for like people, I should like send you this link. There was this 95-year-old woman who lived 5 minutes from me who happened to have she used to have a room of Prince memorabilia. I think I saw it on like Facebook. Her friend posted and she had everything. Like you name it, she had it. She went on stage with him in the past. It was amazing.
Mm.
So I got to interview her and sadly actually several months before she died, which was not
Oh,
she
really?
yeah, like the story went live and that same week she passed away. So
Yeah.
it was very sad, but but I was really happy I was able to tell her story. Because she was just a fascinating woman. Like I think she got into Prince in her 60s. It's like who does that? So she was really
Yeah,
cool.
I'm actually pasting it in the chat because it's a
Okay.
fascinating piece. And yeah, I have the link because I was reading it earlier. Um, yeah, I mean, I feel like you do that a lot. You make people care.
And that's what I always try to do, because I think and I think you probably, experience this too. It's like you're working with an artist and you try to dig into the essence of what makes them special. Why should you care about them? What makes them amazing? What makes you excited to talk about them to other people? And I always try to do that too, because with musicians, there's so many musicians, there's so many people doing things. And so, but everyone has a story to tell. And I've always thought that. And so whenever I talk to people, you try to have a conversation and draw things out of them and find the kind of the interesting angles. And that makes people more relatable because when you read a story on someone and you're like, this sounds like a really interesting person, it makes you want to kind of experience their art and things like that.
Completely, completely. And um, so another thing that I was looking at was how active you are on social media
Yeah.
and yeah, and how you had mentioned that you got jobs out of Twitter.
That is correct. I live in Cleveland, and because I'm not on the coast, it can be kind of challenging sometimes because I don't necessarily like if I'm out at shows, I'm not necessarily running to editors, and I can't have like, I mean, obviously no one has in the last year or so, but can't have coffee with people or a
Yeah.
drink or anything like that. So it's like, how do you get your name out there? And so, Twitter. And, what I like about Twitter is because you can have conversations with people and, there's really no kind of barrier to entry. And, so if I've gotten jobs in the past, like if something, I see something and I tweet about something, I'm like, this is really awesome or this is really cool. And I'll have people reach out to me, like on DM or, even tweet at me, be like, hey, if you ever want to write about this, and I have my DMs open. I don't know if I should say that here, but yeah, I have my DMs open because it's like you want people to be able to get a hold of you.
Yeah.
And I tell this to bands too when I'm, saying, hey, are you putting out music? You people, if someone wants to get a hold of you, you need to make it easy. You need to have an email address that's visible. You need to have just a way of contacting you. And so I kind of make myself as available as possible. But Twitter is fun. It's a good diversion. Where you're like, okay, I can't finish this piece. I'm bored, or I'm on deadline. And you can jump into a conversation and find other kind of music nerds.
It's definitely a time suck for sure. Y-
Yes.
It got a little toxic for a minute around the election, so
Yes.
I opted out, but I think I'm going to go back on because Twitter stalking journalists is like the most fun because you know what they care about at the moment.
Yes. And it's true, because I think the biggest challenge, we face, and it's sometimes that, even as writers we face is, how do you even like know how to pitch people at this point? Because, different people are freelance and people announce job changes there. They announce what they're doing, what they're not doing. And, there's so many writers out there. And so, figuring out, you can actually zero in and do searches and figure out, okay, they are talking about this, or this person seems really into this, maybe they'll like this. It's a lot more work. I think it's a lot more work, but it's a lot more curated work, and I think it probably is more rewarding that way.
Mm. Well, we have a question from Miss Maria Ferrero. She
Oh,
says, Lady Legends, wow, Jamie and Annie, great to see you. What advice would you give to a young writer who wants to work with competing magazines and be able to manage and balance editors being on board?
ooh, so I competing magazines as in people who are kind of rivals or people who.
I don't think it's so much as rivals, but it's like variety of magazines. I mean, like
Yeah,
AV Club and Salon, or,
yeah. You know, I mean, first off, one of the things for young writers is don't duplicate content. Like if you said, okay, I'm going to review, I'm getting an assignment to review a record by band X at one place, you really can't go to someone else and say, "I'm going to cover the same thing," reviews. Like I've had in the past, I've had to turn down reviews because it's like, no, I already have this covered somewhere, so I can't duplicate things.
Yeah,
And that's hard to navigate, and that's really difficult because you're so excited to get an assignment. Paid assignments can be few and far between, and you don't want to turn anything down, but ethically, you
yeah.
need to be careful because editors will see that, and you don't want to, and you might, tick someone off.
Mm,
It's a lot of it is just sort of, getting to know the editors and know the style of different places too. Read the magazine, read the website. It's like, okay, if they cover, if a one website covers mostly metal and you're pitching them a pop artist, they're going to be like, what are you talking about? When
it's the same thing with
yeah,
us pitching writers, you know?
yeah. Absolutely. And so, just kind of know your audience and kind of and honestly going back to social media, look at what editors are posting about on social media. If they're talking about different things, you sometimes it's very true that if you know an editor likes a certain style of music or a certain band or a certain label and you pitch them something and have a good angle, they're probably more liable to take it because it's something they already like.
Yeah.
Especially if it fits kind of what the content they're trying to fill.
Oh, yeah, yeah, definitely. I always tell young publicists that they really have to read and research,
Yeah.
and that's every week on this show we talk about that because it's so important. I mean, you do your research for everything you do, so
And, when you see that sometimes, because, I mean, I get so many emails and so many pitches, and, you can tell the people, and as a writer, it takes so long to put together a good pitch. Like, it's not just something you can toss off. Like, there absolutely is research going into it and seeing what's out there and what's not out there and reading about an artist. And so it takes effort to do that. And yeah, from a PR side too, it takes a lot of effort to put together something good.
but
Because
it's
yeah, when
worth
you
it.
pick a writer, yeah, it is, and that's it. And honestly, when I get a pitch and I can tell that it's someone who, is either like read some of my stuff or is like, I think you might like this, that matters because it's
Mhm.
not just sort of some blanket thing you get. You don't necessarily just feel like a member of a mass email. You feel like, oh, it's personalized. All right. So, and that helps.
Yeah, well, we have another question. How do you come up with content for social media when there isn't a whole lot going on?
So that's my go-to is YouTube because there's so much random awesome stuff on YouTube. And whether it's just, vintage things or I have a song pop in my head, I might tweet about that or I might, be like, or and even sometimes I'll stockpile stuff like, something will happen and I'm like, okay, I'm going to save that for a while. So if there's nothing going on, I can just kind of put it out there. But like, you don't force things. Like I'm the person, I'm on Twitter a lot and I might be responding or liking things, but I don't necessarily feel the need to post about everything or comment on everything or, have a statement on everything. I post when I have something to say, and there's something to be said about that too, that, not feeling, and it's hard because you want to feel pressured. You feel pressured to weigh in and be present all the time. And there's something to be said for logging out and stepping back sometimes. It really does help your mental health, honestly, I find that.
Yeah, I've been trying to get that balance, but
Yeah,
it's hard.
it is hard because for your job, you need to be on social media, I feel like, for, just making sure that, your name stays out there, you wanna be on Twitter, and so it is a hard balance.
Yeah. Now, I know like you're at a different level than most of the bloggers or like smaller journalists. Like you've written for like every big, thing, at least, that I know of. And but we've had these discussions about how can people make money with journalism? And it's hard, and I know that. What do you think of like the newsletter model of making money? Because a lot of people have turned to that.
I'm really fascinated by that. I have not done that yet, but I'm considering it. I newsletters, the modern newsletters remind me so much of what blogging was like, I don't know, 20 years ago,
Or
because it's kind of,
fanzines.
yeah, absolutely. Like they're like the modern version of the fanzine, or like how, people were on GeoCities doing their, diaries and pages.
Yeah.
What I like about them is that they're feeling a niche, and the people who are starting them are like, I'm really passionate about this. This isn't being covered. I don't have a place to write about this. I want to write about it. So I love that because I think that is A, that's so important, and B, there are more voices that are kind of contributing to, the musical conversation. The
Yeah.
payment thing is hard though. I have friends who make a couple $100 a month. I have friends who, potentially make more. If you it's a chicken or egg thing a lot too, because if you already have a following, people are more willing to pay for your content, but to get to that point, you need to be writing for other places too. And and I have friends who are on Patreon too. And so there's also that model too. And so I think that where the danger comes in sometimes is that people don't have enough money. People only have a limited amount of money they can spend on things like this. And to a certain point where it's like, okay, well, I have so many, where can I want to spend everything, but I can't. And so,
Oh yeah.
it's hard. It's a really hard balance. And so I'm not, yeah, it's you see it kind of a lot like journalism. There's a lot of people making a lot of money on newsletters, but then there's people who are trying to monetize it, and that's it's a little bit more difficult, and it takes time.
Yeah.
So,
Everyone can't be Sherry Hugh.
right, exactly, right.
Water and Music is a great newsletter, but
Yeah, no, and I
everybody
love that.
does.
And
Yeah.
but she's so great because she has that niche.
Yeah.
She's like, this is not being covered, and so I'm going to create my own thing. And I love that. I think that's the greatest thing about music newsletters, I think, is
Yeah.
just, and she has the editorial freedom too to, be able to do that. There's no, person you saying, okay, well, we have these competing interests, you can't say this politically, meaning, that might tick off an advertiser. And so it's,
Yeah.
there's a little bit more freedom too with the newsletters.
Yeah, definitely. And I like a lot of times some of my favorite pieces of yours have been pieces that address disability
Mhm.
and access to concerts.
Yeah.
And I always, every time I read one of those pieces, I wish you'd write more about it. You know?
I
Like,
appreciate that. I would love to, and that's a case where I was able to place different things, or I got asked to write about something, or I pitched something, and it's like, okay, cool. I got an editor to do that because, and the frustrating thing is that even, obviously the pandemic has sort of put a, stop to a lot of that stuff. Is that, it got to a certain point where I felt like I was writing the same piece over and over again
mm,
because, there were changes that were happening that were incremental and they
yeah,
were making a difference, but there was still so many things that weren't changing. And so, part of the challenge of that is finding a different angle. It's like I could, write a piece talking about all the bad things that happen over and over again. It's like, but how do I kind of work to make a change because but you have to keep talking about it. I mean, again, that's sort of the flip side is that
Yeah.
you can't stop talking about it because we still haven't solved that problem.
Well, yeah,
And
I
it is
mean, it's ableism, you know?
yeah,
I mean, there's
absolutely.
ableism, we're addressing racism finally to some
Yeah,
degree.
exactly. Long overdue.
And you know, and I think it's really important. And I should really put you in touch with somebody that I interviewed a few weeks ago. She's got a website called Samaritan Mag, where she
Ooh,
covers like good works.
cool.
Her name's Karen Bliss. She's in Canada. She's lovely. You'd love her. I'm gonna hook you
Okay,
guys up because I think she would love to work with you on getting exposure for the issues because
that's
I think
good.
it's very important. You know, I do a lot of mental health advocacy, and you know, we're very slowly addressing that bias too.
It does feel like, yeah, that there's I mean, and I think what you kind of speak to is that there are so many things and, I want to tackle them all at once.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to step back and be like, okay, what can I do today? I can do X amount of things today. And, I can't do everything. I want everything to change right away. And sometimes you can't, but you
Yeah.
have to, but it's true though. But all of those things are so important.
And Hail Persephone is trying to grow a virtual business, but hates Facebook. And I don't think you really need it unless you're talking to an older audience. Do you think? What do you think about that?
It's interesting. I mean, I've been on Facebook a really long time, and I just because just of I think fatigue, I've really kind of stopped promoting a lot of my work there. Part of it is the Facebook algorithm has changed so drastically. You never know if what you're going to post is actually going to get to people. I
Yeah.
can post a link and sometimes it'll like take off, and other times I'll post something, it'll be crickets. So then you're just like, okay, so if I have to go back and try to figure out how to word it correctly so Facebook will actually show it to people, it's like, I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
So I've really kind of stepped back for that. But Facebook is still good for reaching people. I think groups are, I think, a little bit more effective
And I feel
now.
like you never rely on any one element of
No,
social media.
and you can't, and that's, diversifying, and, Facebook is good for things like events, I think,
Mm,
and I think for better or worse, I think a lot of concerts and a lot of venues have really started to, I mean, to rely on that because, I mean, a lot of alt weeklies aren't really, doing listings anymore. They don't exist, and dailies are hard, and
yeah.
so where do you kind of go for advertising and the kind of thing? It's like, well, Facebook. And
Yeah,
people know
for
that they
sure.
can, go there and do that stuff. But for growing a business, I mean, it's so hard. I feel like you need to have a presence there just for SEO. And so if people are searching for you, you have all your information and like you post
Hmm.
things, but especially growing a business, I think Instagram is so much more effective these days. And I know,
Sure.
and it's crazy because they're owned by Facebook, so,
And you
but they're
can
just
cross-platform advertise too, so
exactly.
that's helpful.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Instagram is just so much more robust in terms of what you can do just for attracting people. And, but even though their advertising is terrible, I've done
Yeah.
Instagram advertising and it's not nearly as precise as you'd like.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Do you have like um is it weird for you changing your hat from like your journalism hat to your marketing hat?
It can be. I mean, I think what's a little bit more helpful is that most of the marketing I do is not in music. So I do a little bit more, it's a little bit more, I've done healthcare stuff, I've done,
Hmm.
stuff in the insurance realm, I've done stuff in economic development. I have
Wow.
I have like very weird like niche subjects that I do for non-music. I took for a couple of years, I actually worked at a nonprofit in economic development here. That's how I learned how to do a lot of marketing stuff. I took a
Ah.
break from music. I did freelancing still, but for my full-time job, I did that. And I learned all of these like incredibly interesting things, but I have this specialized information that I understand it. So if people are like, hey, can you write about like in Cleveland, especially, they're like, hey, can you write about that? I'm like, yeah, okay. I get it. So it's helped me a little bit get work in very weird, non-music, kind of more corporate type areas. But
Wow.
yeah, but it's a little bit weird in that sense, just because there's a lot more control.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this client needs to approve this and not. But I mean, honestly, in music, I think it's gotten also a little bit more close down that way. Just in terms of depending on what level and what you're working on, people get a little bit more nervous about what's going out there. And I've noticed that in recent years too. Just
Yeah.
fans and I think clients just get a little bit more like, it's okay, can we see this? And you always have to explain in journalism, like, no, you can't see this in advance. It's not how we do it, but
Right.
it's hard. But yeah, and it's weird. And I think it's still, I still don't quite know how to talk about that work I do because there is still that stigma, I think, sometimes where
Yeah.
you're like, oh, you're doing, you're going to the dark side, you're doing marketing.
Well, no, because I think since it's different topics,
Yeah.
like if you
It's
were
just,
only marketing music, I could see that being the case, but
and I would
other,
feel, yeah, and I would feel weird like doing music PR. Like, I've written some press releases for people and I've done band bios, which I think
yeah,
is pretty common for journalists
yeah.
to do. But I would feel weird if I was like doing PR for a band. Like that
Ugh,
would make me feel just,
it's
I don't
terrible.
know. Yeah. No one wants to do that. Yes.
No, not even the people that already do it. So, so also I've been thinking a lot about like pitches and like things that catch your attention.
Yeah.
Have you ever had one that like it was memorable to you, or has it all been just kind of a blur?
I mean, one of my more memorable ones is that like I got invited, sometimes if you get invited to like junkets, things
Yeah.
like that. I got invited on a junket to
Mm.
Japan a few years ago. And
Ooh.
at first I thought like, is this a joke? Like what? But it was legit. And so like things like that obviously are memorable because they, lead to trips, but those are also extremely, extremely rare.
Yeah.
Um, it's there have been a couple over the years where I've just, where people have, written things out and you can just tell that like, I got pitched a band at some point in recent years with where the musician has a disability. And, but like the pitch was really well done and it was really well written and it was very sensitive. And, I didn't end up being able to do anything with it, but it was like, okay, they really took the time and really took the effort to do that. And so that really stood out to me just because you could tell they, really worked to try to get it right.
And they
Um,
found the right writer.
right,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I mean, and that was just, and so like that stood out to me just because it was like, okay, because a lot of times you get pitches and it's not that it's crass in a way. And I always, sometimes it's like, let's just throw out a bunch of, like this person has depression and so, you should write about them. And, because mental health is such a,
Yeah.
because it is such a big topic now, people use that. And, and it's hard. You have to do it. There's a very specific way, I think, to use that.
I think you have to know it. You
Yeah.
really have
Yeah.
to know it to be able to say it in a sensitive way because I've
Right.
had to cut people off about it quite a bit and edit quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, in that topic.
'Cause it's like, and I think you see this a lot sometimes because it's like, it's people view it as a fad, like, "Okay, this is an angle we can use." And it's like, well,
Mm,
not every artist wants to do that. A lot of artists are really, I'm not sure work with people are very sensitive about that. And they want to, you want to talk about it in a way that's, that honors how they feel about it and how they want to talk about it. And sometimes the pitch doesn't match that. I mean, sometimes it does,
yeah.
but you can just tell. And I always wonder sometimes, I'm like, do artists know they're being framed this way to journalists? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, and I also think like it's really important to know your artist really well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really funny. I always tell the story, but like when I stopped working with Slipknot, a few
Mhm.
months later, one of the guys emailed me and was like, "Hey, what are we doing tomorrow?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't work with you anymore." Like, but he still thought that he just hadn't heard
Yeah.
from me for like whatever reason.
Aw.
And like I did get to be really kind of good friends with them.
Yeah.
But I always want to know my artist probably a little too well for my own good. But like I still go on Twitch to check out Craig Mabbitt from Escape the Fate
Yeah.
because I miss him.
But I think that that does help because I mean, I think, a lot of people I think sometimes think, oh, this is just a business transaction. I'm working with this band. And it's like, well, you have to, when you know a client well and you know someone really well, you can tell their story better to journalists, and you're more invested in making sure that, they get it right and that you frame them right too, because, they're people. And I think a lot of times, people see, oh, there's these big rock stars are playing festivals. It's like, no, at the end of the day, they're just a person. They're going to, they're brushing their teeth just like you.
Right, right. And even like I see that a lot with Tommy Lee. Like I know him so
Oh, yeah.
well that I
That's
finish
right.
his
I forgot.
sentences. Yeah. Like,
I forgot. I'm pretty sure I probably worked with you when he at some point when he was
yeah.
doing PR.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. We definitely, even in your AP days, I know we did. Like we
Yeah.
worked together on stuff. But yeah, like Tommy Lee, like somebody asked him what's going on, and he was like, and I'm like, you got a new puppy, and he was like, oh right, you know. We were on Clubhouse the other day. I'm like, you got a new
Oh, nice.
puppy. You're trimming bonsai trees all the time. Like, like, and that's just even checking Instagram,
Yeah.
being thorough. But, and I'm working with Perry Farrell, and his kid hurt his hand. So I called to find out how that happened,
Yeah.
and how he was doing. And like, you kind of, I mean, it's probably not good for my mental health to care, but like I do, you
But
know.
you know what? It's like you're working with people though. It's not like the artists, you care about them and they're basically like they stop taking your calls then, like, you're on Clubhouse with Tommy Lee still, he's not like, who are you? Like it's,
Yeah,
and I mean, and I'm sure you've run into people though, and I've run into people too that once you can no longer do anything for them, they don't have the time of day for you. And that's
100%.
that's the music industry, to a T. But the good people are the ones that, when you can do nothing for them, they're still happy to see you. And they're still at least, let's have a conversation, what's going on.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and you know what I think about a lot? When did you know that this is what you were going to do for a living?
So it's funny because I've been thinking about this. So when I was in high school, I loved reading alternative press. That was like I mean I had like Rolling Stone and to a lesser extent Spin, but like AP like literally changed my life. Like I saw there was a cover with Bad Religion and I saw in the bookstore. They were on the cover and there was a Britpop special and I saw it and I bought it and it was like it like opened a new world to me. And so I started
Wow.
buying AP and then I, started subscribing to them. And I was young. I was like, I think I might have even still been in junior high. And, but like they had like a contest, like, write a review, we might publish it. And I entered that and I didn't win, of course. But
Really?
like, but I started, for my high school paper, I started an entertainment section. I was editor in chief and I said, we got to have an entertainment section.
I started
So,
one too in mine.
yeah, see, right, because, you had to make it, it didn't exist, so you had to make it exist.
Yeah.
So, I always had that kind of bug, and then in college, I worked for I wrote reviews and stuff for my college paper, but I actually got an internship with AP, like, my freshman year after that, and
Wow.
I'm lucky because I'm in Cleveland and they're in Cleveland, and so I could live at home, and I telemarketed on the weekends and at night, and I worked at AP, and that was, like, and I've done other things, since, but music has always been such a part of it and music writing. I do some music writing, you know, more than ever. But yeah, ever since I was a kid, basically probably like high school. And
Yeah.
so long time.
Now, were your parents supportive of you? Because you went to Harvard. I
I
mean,
did. I
you
did.
like, if I was your mother, I'd be like that?
I
Like,
do I do remember having a conversation with my parents because I think they wanted me to go to business school, and I think I was like, "I'm not going to business school."
right.
And so they were a little disappointed, but I said I was an English major, and so they were like, "Okay." But they were supportive though. They were like,
Oh,
"This is
good.
what you like to do," and, and they saw me doing things, and so, yeah, they were always supportive, and now they're very proud. My dad is always tweeting my things and,
Oh, that's great.
it's very cute. So, but yeah, because they
Yeah.
saw, but yeah, they weren't just like, we're kicking you out of the house because you're writing about
Oh,
music. Luckily, they were like, I think they saw how passionate I was. Because
yeah.
even before I wanted to write about music, all I was doing was listening to music. And they were big music fans too, though. I mean, they
Oh,
always
yeah.
loved music. Yeah. So, my mom used to like steal CDs, like promo CDs I would get. Like I went over to their house and I found like I think like last year, and I found this like huge stack, and I'm like, "Oh my god, mom," that she had been like amassing for like apparently like 20
Wow.
years. Yeah, it made me laugh. Yeah,
That's great. I mean,
yeah,
I got asked when I was getting a real job, like, for years.
yep.
And they
Yeah,
still don't really understand what publicity is, but, you know.
PR is hard to explain to someone because it's like, what do when you actually like you just do it. And so when someone's like, explain your job, going to a really high level and doing the nuts and bolts of it is really difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it's like, there was a time when it was a little bit glamorous. Only a
Yes.
little, but like Slipknot won a Grammy and I was standing right there backstage with them,
Oh, that's cool.
and stuff like that, but that's like 1% and then the other 99 is like sitting making phone calls that never get returned. So,
Yeah, and sending emails into the void.
yes, sending emails. But I do you get a lot of calls these days? People don't call anymore, right?
I get it depends. There's like a couple of publicists that call me, and they're definitely more kind of old school, but
Yeah.
it's basically email. And I mean, I think, but the downside of that is I'm just like drowning in email, and especially now, when the release date went to Friday, everything just got like I would have. I think last week I looked, I had like 300 emails by like noon, or it's just something absurd. There's no way you can even go through it. So when
And
people
how
are,
do you
on
really
Twitter.
stand out, I mean, and that's
Exactly. And that's the biggest issue is that, that there's so much communication and there's so much coming in. It is really difficult. And I mean, that's why I also like social media because I might see someone talking about a band and be like, "Oh,
mm,
this is kind of cool." And then I can go back to my email and say, "Oh, I do have something on this. That's cool." Or a friend is saying, "Hey, this is really awesome. Check it out." I'm like, "Okay." So it also kind of helps you be a little bit of a filter too. But I mean, I follow a lot of music people. I'm
yeah.
not I follow a lot of people whose tastes I like, and so that helps a little bit too.
I gotta now look who you follow and follow them.
I have a lot. I somehow have a lot of Twitter followers, and I'm like, really, I don't say that much interested, but yeah, I have a lot of Twitter followers.
Well, yeah, I mean, I noticed, and it's wild. It's like a whole other job to maintain social media these
It is.
days, but it's kind of worth it. Have you tried Clubhouse yet?
I'm on it. I haven't really like I've been kind of like hopping in and out. I haven't had the time to really kind of devote to like, all right, I don't log on at the right time. I'm like, oh, I got invited to this thing and it was over, and so I need to
Yeah,
like take an hour or like look, and see kind of what's going on. But I'm
we're
curious
doing
about it.
something fun on Monday that I'll remind you about.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's the possibilities of that are extremely interesting
Oh, I've
because
been promoting like crazy on there.
okay.
Yeah, every room I go
Yeah.
into.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, it was because I didn't quite know what to expect, and I logged in. It's like, oh, there's a room. I'm like, oh, there's like literally people talking. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, 'cause I was like, as it feels like going into a party, and as a person, I can be a little bit shy sometimes going to a room of people I don't know. So
Mm.
that's what it kind of feels like sometimes. I'm like, so you have to kind of figure that out.
I
But
even in the real life situations, I've always forced myself
yeah,
to be social. So I'll go in and I'll go, "Hey, everybody," like, and that's so not me. But
you fake it till you make it.
true.
Yep.
Now you live in a two journalist household, don't you?
I do. My husband also does a lot of writing, and it's funny. He hosted. I don't know if you know this. He hosted a metal show on MMS back in the day.
No, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah, long like, geez, almost like 20 years ago now.
Like I've
So you
known
gotta
him for as long as I've known you.
yes,
So,
yes. So he was definitely, so it's funny because we were cleaning out our house and he found every single new metal band CD in our fourth bedroom. But metal, but yeah, but he's, but he does a lot of classic rock and stuff too. So, he
yeah.
interviewed Paul Stanley not that long ago, so our Google Calendar is pretty funny because I'll put my interviews for reminders and it'll be like, I'm talking to Todd Rundgren. He's talking to Paul Stanley. And it's people like that's just normal for us.
And that's
But yeah,
awesome. I
it
mean,
is cool. I'm in our
yeah.
music room, and that's well, all those are his CDs. Because when I moved in, I brought a record collection, and he already had a big one too, so we're trying to figure out we've outgrown our vinyl shelves too, so
That's great. That's
yeah.
great. Well, Um, Now, what I generally ask everybody every week is, what don't some publicists do that you wish they would do? And then vice versa, what do they do that you wish they wouldn't?
Ooh. I'm gonna start off with the wouldn't.
Okay.
And this is so one of the things, and I think this is just a factor of where the business is kind of going. I think there's a lot of just difficulty figuring out what freelancers can have the power to do and not have the power to do.
Yeah.
Especially it's been very kind of turbulent in the last year as well, just because budgets. A
Yeah.
lot of places just literally had no budget and said, we're not taking freelancers this year, or we have a very minuscule budget and so it's very limited what we can take. And that's a bummer for everyone.
Yeah.
It's a bummer for it's hard if you're a staff member because you're doing more work. As a freelancer, you're not getting commissions. As a publicist, you don't, you're trying to get something placed and you can't. And
It's
so
a
and that's
hustle, man.
it is. It's completely a hustle. And so that's just very difficult because I get pitched a lot of times and it's just like, I can't do anything with it. And it's not a function of not liking the band. I mean, I'm like, there's all these bands I love, and I'm like, where can I even place them? I don't know. I think that's a
Right.
lot of too why people are starting newsletters, because they're just like, I want to talk about this, and how do I do that?
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess trying to, but it's difficult. And so trying to figure out and understanding, I guess, the role of the freelancer more is, I think, is something that, and I think I don't necessarily know what the answer is, whether
Yeah.
that's, having a clubhouse room talking about here's the reality of freelancing, or here's,
Yeah.
how people can do better. But that's the most frustrating thing. And sometimes I'll get pitched like, hey, can you just talk to this person? Or hey, can you,
Yeah, no,
here's a
you
quote
got to
from
do
someone.
better than that in a pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's for like a pitch that doesn't necessarily work. Like, I'm glad that, that it's there, but like, also I just can't, just say, all right, it's 2 o'clock. Yes, I'll just talk to this person. Like, you have to have an assignment first.
And also, I find that asking a journalist a yes or no question is so much easier for them. Like,
Yes.
here's all the info, here's where I think it'll fit out of your outlets. I've thought about this, I've read your work, and yes or no, do you want to be with me in trying to get this in?
Yes. Just because there's just so much information coming in. And like if I can say, yes or no, that I'm more liable to answer because that's less overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
and that's really why I started this, because I really wanted to make it easier for the people that are overwhelmed with stuff, you know?
because it is. And I have so much I've done, at jobs I've done PR. And so I've been on the other side, and it is such a thankless job. And it is
Oh
so
yeah.
difficult. And so that's I think having a little bit more understanding too. And I know it's difficult. And so, and but I get, I think what's frustrating too is I get pitched a lot of times, saying, hey, can you write about this? Like, say for the AV club, be like, here's this new band. Can you write about this? When I don't write about new bands for the AV club. That's not something I ever do. I've never really done it. And, it's just saying, hey, can you cover this band for this outlet? That doesn't necessarily, it just shows, oh, you saw my byline there. So I'm going to
Yeah.
pitch you for this. And so but then continuing to follow up to with the same thing. And then it gets a little bit like, okay, it gets a little much
Yeah,
sometimes.
you
It's like,
can't say, can you do something? Because what the hell is something? And why
right,
is it your responsibility to figure out what something is? It's the publicist's responsibility to figure out what
right,
something is. Yeah.
exactly. I will tell you what publicists do right though, which I really appreciate and which is really helpful, is that when people when I get a press release, give me like the needed information. Like make sure a release date is in there, make sure a artist's website is in there, make sure their social media is in there, make sure that there's like, at least a link to a YouTube, something I can click really fast, because
Yeah.
sometimes Spotify is annoying and I try to because I use Chrome and I click on a link and then I have to open it and I'm like, just give me a YouTube link.
Yeah.
But also has the link to photos. Sometimes if you're doing a piece and you're like, I need to find a photo right away, make sure there's an approved photo, there's a link to that. And
I have it
and
in the
that's
signature file.
yeah, exactly. And that's, make it publicists that give you all the information so you don't have to ask for it, is very helpful just because, I mean, it saves everyone time. So you don't have an email chain of like 5 emails trying to get the information. And so kind of make sure everything is there
Yeah,
in
and
one
another
place.
thing, title your photos with the photographer credit.
Absolutely. 100%.
So, because
That's
that's a whole other ask that you have to do after the fact.
yeah. And and that's I always am floored when you get press, photos and there's no photo credit. And then you ask people, they might not know it. I mean, I feel bad for photographers who have worked so hard and do amazing things
Yeah,
too.
yeah. I mean, I've been in forums with photographers and I've been like, listen, when you send them to me, label them name of artist, your name, date if you want.
Yeah.
That and that way I'm not going to rename them. So it'll go out with your name on it.
Exactly. And I mean, that's, most, people when they get a file, they can figure out, they're like, oh yeah, there's the photographer name. And because, you want to give people credit for it. And
Yeah.
people, especially because, a lot of publications, there have been lawsuits in the past with
Mm.
not having proper credit or not knowing if you can source something. And so a lot of places, go above and beyond to make sure everything is buttoned up. And so giving all that information. And and another thing too is like credits and lyrics. If I'm requesting an album for review, send me everything you have. If you have credits, if you have lyrics, if there's anything goes along with it, send it along. Sometimes it doesn't exist. That's cool. But if it does, just send it automatically. So many times I'll go back to people and say, hey, can I get this? They're like, oh yeah, sure. It's like,
Well, they didn't think of you wanting it because some people that are calling themselves journalists these days don't do that deep dive. And it's
oh,
funny because the same thing that you just said, Karen Bliss said when I talked to her a few weeks ago, because she
interesting.
does the deep dive too. And
Yeah.
like, I love journalism, but I love the real journalism, like what you guys do, like the people that I have on this show, like the people that do the deep dive who like having all the information. I mean, shoot, like I read everybody I have on this show. Like for years, I've read everybody I've had on this show. And, I think you have to have some kind of love for journalism to be a publicist, to do it right.
It's true. It's true because it'll, the business will burn you out really fast if you don't. And, just and it'll, and you'll get frustrated because there's so many other things that have nothing, at the end of the day, putting out a great story and writing a great story, that's like the best feeling in the world.
Yeah.
But, but everything leading up to it can be like sometimes like pulling teeth, depending on what you
Ugh.
have to go through.
I could tell you disaster stories. Oh my. But now, is there anywhere or about any subject that you've not written that you would like to in the future?
That is a very good question.
Because I know
Hmm,
everybody's aspirational. Everybody's like, oh, I'd love to
yeah,
write about fashion one day, or I'd love to, love to write about makeup. Like I think that a lot. But
it's funny because I've written about a lot of things. I have just like a lot of like weird little like niche things that I'm just really interested in, like internet, like niche things. I'm trying to think. I can't think of anything offhand because it's one of those things like I do have like a running list of like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I should write about that. Or I
oh
should
yeah.
pitch something on this. Yeah. And I'm bad about writing things down because I'll be like, brushing my teeth or something and be like, oh, that's really interesting. I'll be on Facebook. I'm like, I need to like save that somewhere.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
use the notes function for that all the
yeah,
time.
I do have a notes function where I keep track of things. Like I switched Macs recently, but my old one just had nothing but sticky notes with like very lengthy notes. So I think a lot of the topics I want to write about are still on that computer.
Oh
I
wow.
so, I mean
We'll come back. We'll do a
okay.
revisit on this. But
Okay.
this has been amazing. I really appreciate you taking the time, and
Yeah,
we had a lot of great viewers who are very interested in what you had to say. And
good.
can you tell them where they can find you on social media to follow up with you and
Probably Twitter because that's where I am more these days. So it's just at Annie Zaleski. So I should be
Perfect.
pretty easy to find. So my
Awesome.
website is outdated and I need to like redo it. It's embarrassing. And so every time
Everyone's.
because it's marketing. I very rarely have like a day to sit down and get my own marketing house in order.
And I've had a little bit of time to do that lately, because I've had to because I just went freelance again.
Okay, so yeah,
So,
you understand that.
yeah, so I kind of had to, but yeah, I mean, if not forced, I never would have done it either.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much. And this has been really fun, and I would love to have you on again one day.
Yeah.
And I will talk to you soon. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Yes, thank you.
All
And thank
right.
you. It's always good seeing you.
Yeah, great to see you. I'm going to hit you up soon.
Cool.
And I want to get the answer to that question. All
I'm
right.
gonna
Okay. Say hi to Matt.
I will.
Bye.
Alright, bye.